glad to be here with all of you here on this final panel. It's really warm in here. Take this off. Yeah, it's been an incredible day. I think there's been like tons of really great conversations, bringing us here to what is the future of the Interchain and like where do we go from here as an ecosystem. There's a couple of things I wanted to touch on, but first, please, I'd like to have you all introduce yourselves briefly to our audience.
Hey everybody, I'm Gregory Landua. I'm the CEO of R&D Inc., which maintains the Cosmos SDK and is building Regen network.
Hello everybody, I'm Arinna Shtedle. I'm from Citadel.one. We are both validators and ecosystem contributors for the Cosmos ecosystem.
Hi everyone, I'm John, one of the co-founders and chief research officers at Celestia Labs, and we're building Celestia, the first modular blockchain network.
I'm Susannah, and I am the product lead for the IBC team at Interchain. We're working on the IBC specs and the IBC Go implementation. Thank you.
So as a first question here, I think maybe one of the things I like to do is first talk about like, the problems or the challenges that we face as an ecosystem that we're going to have to solve over the next few years. And then talk a little bit more prospectively about like where we're going as a space. So in each of your opinion, where are the big challenge areas that the Interchain faces moving forward? Whether like on the tech side, talking about things like building technology that allows us to create scalable blockchains, or whether on the user experience side or adoption or things like that. So what are your opinions about what are the biggest challenges we have to face?
Should we go in a line again? Let's go from the other direction.
Yeah, let's go the other.
Well, I think on a general level, blockchain user experience is still pretty horrible, and that's like been an ongoing problem. Also, I mean, from my perspective, working on IBC, if I'm sure any of you guys have ever done an IBC transaction, it's still pretty horrible to do, like looking up the channel that you have to use manually. I mean, there are some advances. For instance, Osmosis have their own front end to do IBC transactions. So seeing user experience improve in that direction, I think is going to be crucial for more extensive adoption. But then generally, like cross-chain compatibility, if we are going to have an interchain future, all of these chains need to seamlessly interact with one another. And I think hopefully in the future you get to a point where you don't actually really care what like blockchain you're actually using, just everything functions as one like thing for the user.
Yeah, so to give a bit of my own experience using IBC, as someone who has spent a bit more of his time, unfortunately, in the Ethereum land, I will say that using IBC is orders of magnitude better UX than anything I've seen in any other ecosystem. So a lot of amazing work has been done to get IBC to where it is, and I'm sure a lot of amazing work will continue to be done to make it the best means of communication across domains. I think one of the big challenges that's still kind of open in making IBC as good as it can be is this notion of shared security. Currently, each Cosmos zone is an independent domain that has its own security mechanism. And having a way to have all of these zones share the same security and be as secure as each other simultaneously means that you'll be able to have communication across zones that can't be corrupted. You would have to corrupt both zones simultaneously instead of just the source zone. So I think this is going to be a pretty big narrative point in the coming months and years, how to get shared security across the Cosmos ecosystem.
That's a very good point, actually. But I wanted to follow up on what Susannah actually said, because coming from a builder perspective and coming from a platform that tried to solve the UX solution, it's still very tough. And definitely, we solved the IBC problem, actually. We made it in the one toggle. But on a side note, in general, when it comes to interoperability, not only within the Cosmos, not only with IBC, when it comes to interoperability that is like cross-chain, meaning if we want to connect Ethereum near protocol of Solana to Cosmos, it's still a harsh process because of the bridging thing. And that's something that's definitely gonna be addressed in the like shortest period. Another thing I wanted to talk about is the staker education, actually, because today we had a wonderful Validated Commons meetup, and we touched upon how stakers don't really know what's Cosmos, how we should contribute to the education in general, so that we can actually empower validators that are more, professional to vote and to determine the right governance. So that's something that's definitely to be addressed as well. But overall, I think Cosmos ecosystem is going in the right direction.
Yeah, well, so I guess I want to frame the question is around what are the challenges. I want to frame my perspective about what the challenges are is everything is kind of born from the tension between sovereignty and coordination, and that's a real creative tension, and it's a real creative tension that I want to applaud the ecosystem for, like, being focused on, because really nobody else is focused on that. The challenges that brings up, there's a bunch of user experience challenges, and a lot of that has to do with how do you coordinate to have a canonical registry of channels or state machines, and that's a governance, that's a coordination, versus just like, hey, it's a free-for-all, do whatever you want, which creates a bunch of cognitive overload for users and for operators and everybody. So that's like core tension, I think, is the core sort of creative tension of the space. I think, I think there's, like, moving forward, how we address that core tension, I think we're going to need to mature. The thing I think we need to mature as an ecosystem most with is governance, right? And it's governance and coordination around maintenance of libraries, maintenance of IBC channel lists, it's kind of boring governance. It's kind of like technocratic, boring governance, but we need to do it in a transparent and inclusive way, because that's what's going to maintain the openness and the dynamism of the ecosystem that's so compelling and exciting for all of us.
Are there any particular libraries or infrastructure pieces that you think have been particularly problematic when it comes to governance?
That's a good question. I don't know. The things that are on my mind maybe are related to kind of like what's the role of the Cosmos hub. There's oftentimes conversations that I think start to drift into this, which, like, is the Cosmos hub somehow maintaining sort of like an interchain naming service? Is the Cosmos hub maintaining a router for IBC in order to offload some of the coordination issues? How do we kind of create central coordination systems in a way that the ecosystem trusts and is sort of neutral enough and isn't extracting value? That's what's on my mind when I'm thinking about it. So, like, IBC denom and naming is a big one of those, I think, which relates to user experience, and ultimately I would put that in a category of a governance problem. You could monetize it, like you could solve that by being like the first to market and being the one that everybody adopts, but not really kind of like solving the root issue. Or you can solve it in a more cumbersome bureaucratic way, or we could like choose to not solve it at all and see what happens.
I also think around that question of governance, I mean, for instance, I think on lots of chains in the ecosystem, for instance, I was reading about there's always governance proposals to adjust like incentives on osmosis, and people aren't really engaging with those kind of proposals because like the average person doesn't really care about those things. So I think there's also kind of a failure in letting people vote on every single thing that
nested
like,
governance kind of.
Yeah.
Who decides what?
Yeah, and for instance, things like you can vote. It's a governance vote to update like an IBC light client, and like most of the people who are going to vote on this proposal probably don't really like know exactly what they're voting on, or don't really like care, for instance. So like maybe in the future there should be leveraging more like kind of technical experts or trusted kind of authorities who are going to make like technical decisions which like probably the average person doesn't necessarily know or really care about. But then obviously this is like trading off some decentralization for greater kind of efficiency.
I think the problem you're addressing here is the problem of specialization, which is like bound to happen in the space. I see like two big challenges from, you know, extracting from what you guys have said here. So there is the specialization problem, which means that as things get more technically complex, and as more people enter the space, it's going to be harder for folks who are not super plugged into the ecosystem to be able to make decisions about what's right. And you know, we start to see a little bit of that in Cosmos with like some of the contentious governance votes that have passed in the last couple of months. That's been like, really fascinating to watch, by the way. Like, I mean, looking at that and overlapping that with like, you know, things that happen in sort of like more macro politics has been really interesting. And the other challenge, you know, I think you put it quite well, is the challenge of is the trade-off between sovereignty and coordination. And here, I think within the Cosmos space, I think we have really good technology to facilitate the coordination aspect while maintaining sovereignty. But to your point, like that starts to fall away once you start getting over into other ecosystems. And then you're just like expanding this coordination problem to like a much broader set of technologies. So, you know, looking at the bigger picture, you know, I tend to think of the Interchain not just as like Cosmos, but I like to think of the Interchain as like the broader blockchain, you know, decentralized or ledger space. How are we going to arrive at coordination? And you know, maybe to put it in perspective, let's look at the web, right? Like look at the internet and the amount of coordination that we have at the base layer, like TCP/IP. There's a tremendous amount of you know, these technologies are homogeneous, and then there's a whole lot of heterogeneous technologies up the stack, and it feels like in crypto it's going to be hard to arrive. You know, I'm struggling to figure out how we will arrive at homogeneous coordination at the base layer while dealing with the challenges of specialization and governance and remaining decentralized. Like, I think this is really the tension. How do we arrive here? Like, you know, this is sort of long-winded, but like, how do we get to the kind of grail of like decentralized technologies with no central control and sovereignty and et cetera, but still maintain a homogeneous layer at the base layer?
Everybody's looking at me. I think IBC. I think
Standards.
right.
Good, yeah.
So I think it has to do with if at the base layer we can have a non-rent seeking, non-political technology that works well, that people can adopt, iterate, and expand. That's an open standard, which I think is the beauty of Cosmos, right? Is that there is an attempt, at least, to create that, you know, to use inter-blockchain communication protocol to create a standard that then people can, you know, move up a layer and have more heterogeneity around their state machines and the specific application logic that they're following, you know, who is able to vote on when, these sorts of questions, what the application does, and like getting all the way up in there. So I think, I mean, without being like super just hand wavy, I mean, I think the answer to that question is IBC.
So I guess I also have a few thoughts on this, which is that it sounds like the problem that you're describing is kind of like comparing something like, let's say, the IP, right, protocol, TCP protocol and stuff, which are, you know, effectively, you know, the specification, implementation, and so on are, you know, public goods. You can't really profit off of them, but they form a neutral, apolitical base layer that you can build applications on top of. In the blockchain space, like you said, we have blockchains which are inherently political, which are inherently not necessarily for profit, but they're rent-seeking in certain ways. So this is like fundamentally the blockchain protocols start at a different point than something like a TCP protocol. The suggestion of some sort of committee, some sort of apolitical standard seems to be a reasonable one. Although if the standard is designed by a single protocol, then you get into the point that it's effectively just a mechanism for implementing some piece of the protocol itself rather than an actual standard. So if anything, if you really want to have some sort of neutral standard that works not just in the Cosmos chain, in the Cosmos ecosystem, but that works across the entire interchain, including other chains such as Ethereum, such as maybe not Bitcoin, but such as Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, what have you, across all the chains, across all the interchain. Potentially it would be good to have something like a shared standards body that is funded by all of these protocols together that can make apolitical decisions since it's not subservient to any single protocol. Of course.
How close are we to having that with...
I don't think we're any close.
Not close. I mean, if I had to place my bets, I would say it's not going to happen in the next 10 years. But it would be nice.
This is really interesting because, like, in the web, like, we do have these bodies. We have like the Web3 and we have IEEE. I'm not exactly sure.
W3C, you mean?
W3, sorry, Web3, W3C, yes. I'm not exactly sure if people think those are, or if there's some amount of corporate capture of those
for sure
bodies. And I think that the ethos of crypto and like decentralized technology is to like not have this capture because it introduces points of centralization and perhaps of coercion. I'm going to throw that as another point of tension here, or like as another like sort of issue that will need to arise. I guess like can we arrive at truly decentralized technologies with like no central point of control, or is there always going to be sort of like a point where there can be capture of either the tech or the applications or the standards?
I think that's a philosophical question more than a technological one, and I guess my answer is...
I love to talk about philosophical questions around crypto. So.
Yeah, well, I think my answer to that is there'll always be a dynamic tension, and there'll always be sort of a evolutionary process that is moving back and forth between the incentives and the desire to capture something in order to extract value from it, and the incentives and the needs to create sort of space and freedom and push against that, and it's going to kind of go back and forth a lot. And I think that happens in different levels. I personally see IBC as a sort of like a tool. I would say that many of the blockchain networks currently end up sort of like in a position of some sort of like coercive economic sort of like forcing function to try, like pulling people. Everybody needs to be on this, and you kind of get a cultural thing, and a tribalism occurs around it. And in some ways, IBC is actually kind of like the antidote to that at this moment, from my perspective, because I think it's fairly light what it prescribes. You need fast finality, kind of like it's.
But it's also that the ecosystem is young. So not so like, from what we're seeing, kinda, I guess it's the general tendency of like big companies coming over to the places, what Gregory basically mentioned. So, and yeah, basically I believe that with the development of Cosmos, with the more applications and more like niches coming to the ecosystem in general, it will be more of the companies trying to get over. So, yeah.
I think there's in the history of the world, there's like multiple ways that standards form, and like for instance you could have a committee that's kind of saying this will be the standard, or sometimes they can just emerge on their own based on like everyone is literally using this thing, so therefore this becomes like the standard that everyone's using. So it's not inconceivable that there could, based on like utilization, be like natural standards developing in the ecosystem. And obviously, like I think we're all hoping or thinking that IBC may become one of these standards in the long term. So I think it would be cool to have this like body of all the blockchains coordinating, but it may not be necessary as well. And long term, things could just emerge in other ways.
But I do think that the Cosmos has the potential to actually scale to more like ecosystems, and from our like bad dreams, if that makes sense. So basically, it can be an additional layer, like a deep tech layer that can actually connect various ecosystems, not like 100 bridges, but like the built-in solution to easily connect various ecosystems. Not like IBC is nailing it, like no wonder. But if we can create a kind of layer that's has the potential to actually scale to various like ecosystem and establish cross-chain applications, so the Cosmos will have an opportunity to share this standard and to actually to provide it to the general practice to all of this. So if that's possible, but it's also kind of far away from now, I guess.
So with respect to IBC being an emergent standard, potentially one counterpoint is that the requirements for IBC, as you said, are very little. You basically just need fast finality. But unfortunately, there are a few chains that just inherently, as part of their social agreement of the chain itself, think that fast finality is a bug, and that think slow finality is actually a feature, which might hamper the adoption of IBC for those chains for the simple reason that they can't use it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so you can still use IBC without having fast finality, but it wouldn't be with like a light client implementation. So the trust assumptions would be changing in this case, but you could still tap into that standard, but you would be compromising on like your security assumptions. And I mean, we already see like other chains that want to tap into IBC, not directly like through, but for instance, Adler is kind of acting as like a gateway for other chains to tap into the IBC ecosystem. Like Chain uses like a peg zone to interface with Ethereum not having fast finality. So I think we're already seeing these things kind of happening, and it's still like early days. But yeah, obviously this is like a existing constraint, but there are workarounds, I guess.
For what it's worth, I did use Axelar the other day to move stuff from Ethereum to the Cosmos ecosystem, and it was absolutely amazing how fast and efficient it was.
It was great. It's great. Yeah. Shout out to Adler.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here, but
I want to hijack the. I have a question. I have a question for John and everyone, because you had mentioned the vision for excuse me, interchain security. And I think up until now, I think most of that conversation has centered around a hub and zones. And what I was hearing you say sounded different and exciting. And one of the most exciting things for me has been the idea of sort of nested shared security and governance, in which different zones and hubs are co-securing each other in kind of an alliance, in which it's not just a simple like we're the security and you're getting it from us, but instead we're providing some security with our validator set and you're providing some security with your validator set. It's very exciting. Is that what you were speaking towards? That distinction between sort of like a hub just leasing security to people, but more a heterogeneous sort of like security swapping ecosystem of some sort?
To a certain extent, it could be construed like that. Like the notion of your hub and all you're doing is renting out security and that's it, and it's like a unidirectional exchange. I don't think is the end game, which apparently you imply you don't think it either, maybe. But there could be a mutually beneficial relationship where essentially by getting security from another chain, then you can contribute fees to that chain and essentially reinforce additively and with compounding effect as more chains borrow security in this mechanism. You can effectively have additive security as more chains use this zone. So it's not just a purely, I don't know, say parasitic relationship, but it's like a mutually beneficial relationship where one side can get security and the other side can provide not just a fixed amount of security, but that can provide increasing security as more chains use it. That's the kind of model that I'm thinking of as the future of shared security.
So a little bit different than my galaxy brain. There's like a security co-op of some sort. I'm like thinking of like NATO, for instance, because it's a security alliance, right? I mean, it's a different type of security, but it's a useful political metaphor.
Yeah, I think some of the things that were being discussed today around Tendermint 2.0 and Typhoon and these sorts of algorithms start to tend towards this ability to have this nested sort of like, I don't know, shared security where people are like different zones or in different ecosystems are sharing their security.
Like we could contribute.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of
you're the one who told me about this before.
Well, and I think this is a present moment conversation, right? Like Regen network, we have a sovereign validator set. We also love and support the Cosmos Hub. Is there a scenario in which Regen network would, forego our validator set and lease security from the Cosmos Hub because of some increase in security and some additive economic relationship? Will we forego our sovereignty? Or is there a way in which our validator set is valued in that exchange as well, and they maintain, they're like, we're like taking another step. It's like, actually, with our powers combined, Captain Interchain or whatever.
So if you've heard of this notion of sovereign rollups from the Celestia team, which I'm a co-founder of, the notion of sovereign rollups is essentially that you can have a zone, a domain, that runs on top of Celestia, and that shares security not with Celestia, but rather with all other zones and applications that are built on top of Celestia. And that's where you can get essentially additive security, where every one of these essentially adds to the total security of everyone. So it's not just a strictly unidirectional relationship. Now the beauty of sovereign rollups is that for a variety of these zones who already have their sovereign validator set and who enjoy the privilege of being able to hard fork the chain or soft fork the chain or make governance upgrades, with a sovereign rollup you are not subject to the rules of a particular base layer. This is different than Ethereum applications, where an Ethereum application is subject to the governance decisions of the Ethereum community or Ethereum Foundation, if you think it's governed by the Ethereum Foundation. With a sovereign rollup on Celestia, you actually retain sovereignty in your application. You retain the ability to hard fork, and you retain the ability to accrue value to your sovereign token at the application layer. So you essentially gain shared security, but you don't give up sovereignty and you don't give up value accrual to your application token, effectively getting the best of both worlds.
How is that different from like if I just using Interchain security to lease from the hub, like lease security from the hub as an app chain?
How specifically would Interchain security look like? I think there have been a few proposals for Interchain security mechanisms. Like what mechanism specifically are you thinking of?
My understanding is that you would apply to the hub.
So that's all. I'll stop you right there. If you want to be a sovereign rollup in Celestia, you don't need permission from Celestia
There's not
whatsoever.
A vote.
There's
right?
no vote. There's no governance decision.
And maybe that's the core difference between sort of like the proposed hub interchain security system, in which hub votes to say yes, you're accepted, and we'll sort of grant security, and the Celestia vision, in which there's sort of a permissionless ability to access that security. Cool. I didn't realize that difference.
We could go on here for a long time. I didn't even ask all my questions, but we're gonna have to wrap this up here because we're conscious of everyone's time, and there's a cocktail going on upstairs. I'd like to ask one last question: is like, what's the like when you think of the interchain in let's talk about reasonable time frames here. Say 5 years. What does that look like? What's the topology of the interchain look like? This is something I think about a lot is like the topology of the Interchain network. In fact, the Interop, the podcast that I host, like the tagline is we study and we try to understand the topology of the Interchain and the technologies that make it up. So yeah, what does that look like in your guys' view?
In 5 years, you told?
Well, whatever time frame you're thinking, maybe you're thinking 100-year time frames, but
Like cross-chain applications, like on a built-in level, so that I can, I don't know, borrow on one blockchain, like item, and then go for repayment another, which is a kind of a cool use case for Cosmos. And when we first joined the ecosystem, that was our main vision. So, and the cross-chain applications that are enable for average users, so no need to to dig deeper. And from the UX perspective, it should be more of a couple of click solution. So this is what I'm thinking, but it's not like 5 years, not even, maybe around 10. So, but we're developing.
I would expect within 5 years, which is a very reasonable amount of time. When you first said a reasonable amount of time, I thought you would say 1 year or something, and I was about to stop you and be like, no, that's not reasonable. But 5 years is pretty good. I would expect actually that we would see some emergent adoption of IBC across the interchain, not just within Cosmos, not just within Cosmos ecosystem, but rather I would expect that we would see independent implementations of IBC across many, many different chains, and we already see one happening. I think Near Protocol recently announced they had native integration.
Okay. There's the Beefy Light client for parachains and also the Near Light client.
There you go. So I'd expect not just two now, which is news to me. I would expect many, many hundreds, potentially thousands of chains outside, developed outside the Cosmos ecosystem to adopt IBC as a interchain communication protocol.
I'm sorry, and is Near like building a bridge, or how it will look like?
So I think the work is a collaboration between Composable and the Near Foundation are also obviously collaborating with them. So they'd make like a light client implementation so that they can use the IBC transport layer with a Near light client, and then you'd use a Tendermint light client as well to go to Cosmos chains, or the Beefy light client to connect Near to parachains as well.
Okay, thank you.
Greg, any final thoughts?
Well, I think you're going to see what we're calling blockchains being used for municipal elections and local mutual credit systems. And I think you're going to see it also being used for like global nested jurisdictional carbon accounting, where big agencies like the UN or nation states and public blockchains are all interoperating. And I think that's going to be running, on IBC as sort of like the base transport layer, but people are going to be choosing a pretty wide variety of different, development frameworks. So I think a lot of it will happen in the Cosmos ecosystem, Cosmos SDK, CosmWasm. I think there's going to be really strong adoption of that. But I also think you're going to see, significant amount of work happening with other toolkits. And I guess, the political dimension to that is, I think there's going to be pressure and need, and in 5 years, quite a bit of kind of like blockchain alliance stuff that is not happening with the traditional like, hey, let's just swap tokens before Genesis, but instead is going to be established existing blockchains figuring out how to do essentially like blockchain mergers and acquisitions, basically. And you're going to start to see that happen. Incentive alignment will take place, and it's going to be pretty weird and fun.
Very cool. Looking forward to that weird fun stuff. Thank you. Thanks to all of you. And thanks to all of you for sticking around on this last panel.